Joel Harrison, as I was saying, I don't have a strategy. I just go into these things like as if the two of us decided to play a tune together and see where it goes. I tell myself it's going to go in one direction. Inevitably, it goes in a different direction. I think whatever experience of improvisation just applies to so many things in our lives. But having said that, the reason I wanted to talk to you today in the context of the Winter Jazz Fest is because you are hosting this alt guitar summit. And I have to say, I feel like I've had my head in the sand because this is something that you've been doing for 15 years or something.
Yeah.
And I'm just catching up on it. And I was just fascinated when I learned about it. And you seem to be somebody who just is such an advocate for the guitar and a lover of the guitar and the potential of the guitar and music that can be made with the guitar. I just thought I just want to catch up with you a little bit and hear your story. So that's why we're here.
Great.
So having said that, who are you and what's your story?
Well, let's not go back to when I was born.
Okay.
I don't want people falling asleep.
All right.
But
you came up in DC?
Yeah, let's go back to the genesis of the Guitar Summit. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Well, I'm a guitarist and a composer, and I've been putting out music since, I guess, the early 90s. And at a certain point, I started to program a festival for the late lamented Cornelia Street Cafe and had so much fun doing it that I said, I want to keep doing this. And it happened very organically. And the Cliff Notes version of this is that I enjoy bringing people together in situations that they would never be together otherwise to make music. I enjoy the infinity of sounds that is possible with a guitar. Unlike so many other instruments, the guitar is an orchestra. The guitar embodies much of the history of American music. Not so much in jazz, although these days there's a ton of guitar in jazz, more in blues and country, and eventually rock and roll. But I like to say that the story of our country can be told through guitar and voice. And so I love all kinds of music. I love all kinds of guitar. I tend towards, modern creative improvisation. But I've just been putting on these events, concerts now for 15 years. We have mostly in New York City and surrounding areas. We have a guitar camp we started that's a teaching camp that's the only thing like it in the world, where we have Kurt Rosenwinkel and Rodney Jones and John Schofield and Bill Frisell and Julian Lodge show up and eat with you and talk with you and teach you. And I've also written some books about the guitar recently, and I have a podcast where I interview some of my favorite players. It's all, when you look back, you don't really know how it all happened. It just seemed like something seems like a good idea, and then you do it. And then what you say to yourself, because there's ups and downs, you say, we all need to make the world a better place. That's partly what we're here for. And sometimes the only thing we can do is choose what we're closest to in the niche that we know best to do that. It's a small corner of the world, guitar players, but I like to try to add something to the scene and not just feel as if the scene needs to give something to me.
Mm-hmm. Tend to your garden. Everybody's got their own little plot of land. You, as you mentioned, you like to talk to other guitar players and hear their stories. What do you think is gained by not only studying the music from a musician, but getting a sense of who they are as a person? Like, what has your takeaway been from being around all of these, musicians that you admire on a personal level? You say the students at the guitar camp can eat with Julian Lodge, not just take a lesson with him.
Well, I just love it. I mean, the fringe benefit for me of organizing this camp is I've become friends with almost every one of my heroes. Mm-hmm. And even though now some of my heroes are younger than me, mm-hmm. like Julian, I'm just a better person from all that I've learned from these people. I try to apply it to my guitar playing too, but I feel like I've become kind of an encyclopedia of guitar knowledge. I'm waiting. I'm not being facetious. I would love to teach a course at a college about guitar and life and what the guitar means in our country and what it means to improvise, and how improvisation, and in particular ways on the guitar, is true democracy. It's a model for living. And that's what I've learned from some of these folks, is that they've developed a high degree of empathy and sophisticated ways of communicating, and they think deeply about the world and what the world means, and what they can give the world through sound. And they're just funny, beautiful people to be around. And I like to see that, not just the music.
So you've alluded to this a couple times, that you feel that you can tell the story of America through the guitar. I mean, do you have a specific and concise narrative that can be told? See, seriously, I mean, how do you frame
That's
that?
such a good question. I probably could, but I'd be kind of riffing a little if
Yeah.
I tried to do it right now.
Yeah.
But in this book that I just released, called "Pity the Genius: A Journey Through American Guitar Music in 33 Tracks," once I started to study the history of people that I hadn't even heard of, that
Yeah.
I discovered and felt that they were important to mention, I was like, man, there is such an unbelievable history in all of these people, and they connect to each other. You know, Eddie Lang somehow connects to Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a bit of a line to get there. Certainly connects to Charlie Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to see the connections
Hmm.
between some of the lesser known people in the 50s and the one who popped up to become better known, and between Les Paul and Danny Gatton and Lenny Breau and Chet Atkins and Wes Montgomery. And you see, man, this is a line with many deep societal as well as musical connections. It's fascinating.
I just watched the Dylan movie this week. I don't know if you've seen it.
I hadn't.
And you know, the climax of this film, it's based on a book called Dylan Goes Electric. The climax of the film, I mean, it's 2 hours of anticipation for the moment when Bob Dylan plugs in his electric guitar. That's the climax. And I walked out of the film thinking, we take for granted how radical it was for so many people that the guitar got electrified, that it seemed to represent more than just amplifying a guitar. It took on all this other meaning. Do you have any sense of what electrifying the guitar meant in terms of the development of the American century?
You know, you've done an unfortunate thing by opening a can of worms, because this movie, I don't know, I don't want to see it. I don't need to see it, because I think it's just a blip on the horizon that's been glorified to be more than it is. Peter Yarrow, God bless him, who just died, who was there behind the soundboard, felt the same way. I asked him about it. He said, was this a really big deal? And he said, yeah, kind of, but you know, the sound was terrible. It was just kind of like a thing, and everybody's made a big deal about it. And why not just let Dylan do what he wants to do? That being said, the electric guitar changed the world, and Dylan had a very small part of this. You know, there were a lot of people doing incredible things on the electric guitar, obviously before him, as he would probably be the first to point out.
I mean, I think in the long list of words that we would use to describe Dylan, guitar player would be very low on the list. But I mention it only because it opened up that thinking for me.
If you think about the power of the electric guitar in our lives, there's a small bits of power where all of a sudden Charlie Christian has a pickup, and all of a sudden can be heard. I mean, that's pretty heavy. He becomes more like a horn. But if you consider the impact of the electric guitar in the 1960s and how the world changed, and every single, I don't want to exaggerate, most of the better known guitar players now were deeply influenced by that music. You see that it's just become this iconic machine that's such a vessel for storytelling and the world that we live in.
Yeah.
It's not quite as popular as it was in a certain way in pop music, but in terms of the life I've lived, I mean, when I saw Jimi Hendrix in the Woodstock movie play at Woodstock, it was epical.
Mhm.
Epical? Am I?
Epic?
Epic. Epochal.
Yeah.
And
Epochal.
and you know, the fact that that so much in jazz guitar now came from that has deeply affected jazz music as well.
Yeah. I mean, you said affected and you started to say infected. And I don't think of an infection necessarily as negative, but it is very interesting, the interplay between the sounds of popular music or pop music and the way, particularly in the guitar world, they've entered. I mean, the sort of the straight guitar tone that we associated with jazz guitar for years was kind of like devoid of effects for a long time. And then it went through this period of lots of effects. And now I think we're, like in so many parts of culture, we're kind of in the end of linear history. It's all happening
Everybody's
at once.
doing. Yeah, exactly. But you know, I'm old enough to remember that when you stepped on a stomp box, you could really get some shade from somebody on the bandstand,
Sure.
which seems very quaint at this point. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Do you see, right, of course, now people, and actually so much of a person's, of a player's sound today is not just in their harmonic approach or what's happening in their fingers, but it's in the choices that they make in their tones and, you know, in their sounds.
I love that. We've got a world in the guitar where we go all the way from Alan Holdsworth to Derek Bailey to Sonny Landreth to Kurt Rosenwinkel and Bill Frisell, and then people who barely even touch the guitar, like Fred Frith, who are making incredible sounds through the various things that they plug into it. And man, what other instrument can do that?
Right. Well, and that's an interesting thing. I mean, I suppose many instruments could do it on some level, but it hasn't evolved that way. I mean, the guitar has evolved in that direction.
Yeah.
You said early on, when I started interviewing musicians, I interviewed Steve Kahn, and he told me that when he got to New York in the early 70s, he felt that the guitar was so incapable of keeping up with the harmonic developments that were happening with the piano players. He said, I felt like we were playing a toy compared to what was happening in these other instruments. Today, as you alluded to, you know, New York is a guitar town. I mean, it's just filled with these innovative guitar players. Do you see that arc as well? Or
yes, but there's a reason for that. You know, the guitar is incredibly hard to play jazz on, and it would take a bit, if you don't play the guitar, to tell you why. But since middle C exists in 5 places on the neck, unlike any other instrument, to negotiate just physically the lines that horn players and piano players have developed is incredibly hard. Please take my word for it. So when people have learned to do that, and it took a while, it's just amazing. And so I think that the guitar took a while to catch up, and Steve was right. But now, I mean, the technical legerdemain that young people are bringing to playing bebop and very different kinds of jazz is astounding to me.
So do you find that part of the innovation in the instrument is the pedagogy, the teaching, the information, the technique, access to good teachers?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not talking about moving anybody's heart and soul here, which is something different.
Yes.
And has nothing to do with technique, or very little. What I'm talking about is people who finally had good teachers, you know, and a ton of them. I mean, when I was growing up, there was almost nowhere to go to learn this in person. People forget that, you know, there was like 3 jazz camps, and good luck, you know, going to one. And trying to find a good guitar teacher in your town, if it wasn't New York or Boston, was really tough. And now, I don't know, man, people are like, somehow by the age of 14 playing Donna Lee at, metronome 300.
I think this is a big question, not only with guitar, but in general, that I've been trying to ask a lot of people is, are there more young, talented musicians in general on the planet today than there were? And maybe it's a result of social media, YouTube, getting to see stuff. You could be in any corner of the planet and receive this information. Or on the other hand, are we just more aware of it because of the same tools? Because
there's more of everything.
Yeah, there's just more. There's just more.
There's more teachers. Yeah. There's more students. There's more people playing every instrument. There's more people consuming the planet's resources. Yes. But I do think it is more ubiquitous in our minds because of social media. But I also think that it wasn't a thing to go study jazz guitar 50 years ago, sure. But there's thousands of students getting degrees in that now. And so it very much has been incorporated into our educational system. And in certain ways, for better or for worse, it's keeping jazz music alive because so many people are supporting themselves teaching. And so many people are becoming accustomed to learning about the music at school. It's not like just so much going out to the local club anymore, is it?
No, it's not. And in a way, I mean, having a relationship with any instrument is enriching and is a great idea. The guitar seems like one of those really common instruments. I think you could walk into a lot of people's houses, more than finding people with a piano in their house that have a guitar in their house. I think everybody kind of knows somebody who has a guitar or probably has a guitar somewhere.
But that's the beauty of the instrument. When you're around a campfire, what are you going to play? Yeah. A saxophone? Yeah. No. When you're singing happy birthday to somebody and there's no piano in the house, and unfortunately there aren't many anymore, that's right. What are you going to play? Yeah. Somebody has a guitar. Yeah. It is the everyman or every woman.
This is why you say it's tied to the democratic idea.
Yeah, and it doesn't take much to play a little bit on the guitar, and I guess kind of true of the piano, but good luck trying to play a trumpet after 3 months.
Oh, I always felt the thing about the guitar is that you can get up and running and play, half of the songs you're going to want to play at a party in the first couple of days or the first week of just a bunch of open cowboy chords. What comes next?
Yeah, is that's the tough part.
Did you ever hear Elvis Costello talk about learning how to play the blues, and the F chord is what that destroyed him? He said, I got C and G and I thought we're off to the races. And then somebody showed him an F bar chord and he said, oh really God, no, now we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So just quickly, let's talk about how you approach putting together these summits, because you've got one coming up tomorrow, and hopefully we're going to get this out, some of it in front of people that if they hear about it, they might get interested in going to see it. So how do you curate these things?
My goal is to put together a slate of people who add up to more than the sum of the parts when you think of the bill, that you might not ordinarily think of them all being in the same place at the same time, for instance, that they have personalities that play off each other. So you'll see a lot of different approaches to the instrument. And I also like to have surprise meetings at these things where all of a sudden two people are playing together for the first time who never played together before. And I guess it's kind of one of my proud achievements that there's been a lot of first time meetings that I've seen at my events that are really exciting. Like, watching Julian Lage and Wolfgang Woodspiel play for the first time is, thrilling. And I also try to have a story told by the entire event. Some of them have a very specific focus. This one, not so much, but some much more specific. And then I also try to make space to, bring in some established and also players who aren't as well known, because I feel like part of my job is not just to hire the people who already are working, but to, give some small space to elevate those incredible players that we might talk about here in New York now and then, because we're sort of in the inside of this, but that the greater world knows nothing about. Yeah. And, when I started, I was giving sort of a small pedestal in my own modest way to somebody like, let's say, Ben Monder. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot, he doesn't really need it now.
Sure, but that's a way of saying, you recognized early on, and that's part of what you do is look for young talent.
So who's happening now?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's really important to me. And on the label that I started, I'm trying to record people that are at that place where people are talking about them, but they're not quite established yet. And that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, that is a great argument to get down to the Guitar Summit at New Blue tomorrow afternoon and check it out.
Yeah.
Joel, it's really a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we get a chance to talk more at length in the future. And I'm going to go out and get your latest book.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.